We're live now.
Okay, good evening to all. Good evening to all. This is Dr. Chandramogan from Sri Samraj Physiotherapy Center, Dindivanam. A warm welcome to all the participants of EXRX India webinar series 3 and also YouTube subscribers. Today's topic is vestibular rehabilitation in pediatric population. Will be taken by Dr. Janani from Sairam Academy in association with PKL Studio, Chennai, Physioactive, Gurugram, Sri Samraj Health Services and Fitness and Rehab India YouTube channel. I welcome volunteer Jellakavya and our EXRX team members, Dr. Rupesh and Professor Duna. I now request our resource person, Dr. Janani Ravi, to start the session. Please, madam.
Yes, thank you, sir. Okay, so good evening, one and all. In today's session, we'll be dealing about vestibular dysfunction in pediatric population. So before I would start, I would just like to tell you what are the aspects that we will be seeing today and why is this topic really important. So initially, until around 2014, it was actually thought that only this particular vestibular dysfunction was present or more prevalent among the adults. So until 2014, if you just go about the research or the studies, so there are very, very minimal amount of studies that is being done on pediatric population. As I already told you, even the medical professionals believed this particular vestibular dysfunction affected or was present only among adults. Only after 2014, so drastically based upon the evidences and based upon the children who were affected with the common symptoms such as dizziness or vertigo, only then many studies came up, and after only many studies or many students were actually screened or many children were screened, only then the population, only then the prevalence was found that it was almost equal to the prevalence rate that is present in the adults. So that is one of the important reasons why I'm actually talking about this vestibular dysfunction. And the other reason why this was actually not properly diagnosed before 2014 or so is because it was more difficult to diagnose a child with vestibular dysfunction. So I'm not talking about the pervasive disorders here. It is just a vestibular dysfunction where the child complains of vertigo or dizziness. So this vertigo and dizziness being the common symptoms that usually a child has, and this is more often is not explained or well told by the child, as because of the vocabulary vocabulary restrictions, the child is not able to exhibit what he or she feels. So that also makes it difficult to diagnose a child with this vestibular dysfunction. And why is it actually important in pediatric population? So if you see in case of adults, so if a person has around 30 years or so, once he is completely developed, so he'll be able to tell you what problems he has, and even more than that, so in adult population, the development is completed. Whereas in the pediatric population, if the child has a vestibular dysfunction and if that goes undiagnosed, that can lead to developmental milestones or developmental delay, which can actually lead to problems in the learning areas, not only motor development, but also it can lead to problems in the school, such as learning difficulties, such as frequent falls and many injuries, etc. So this is the reason why I'm here to talk about this vestibular dysfunction. I hope I've given few notes on why this is important. And so next is we will see what is the outline of today's class. So in today's class, in today's session, I'll be dealing more about the prevalence, the vestibular system development. So only more often as a physiotherapist, as we have major part to be played in the management, we only concentrate in the management and we do not go about diagnosis. So this condition, which is more important, actually in commonly every condition that a physiotherapist sees, every child or every adult patient, diagnosis plays a major role than the management. Only if you know your destination, only if you know what you are treating, you will be able to select the appropriate treatment. That is why the diagnosis is more important. And when it comes to children's, it becomes really a difficult task to actually diagnose a child with vestibular dysfunction. Not only the vestibular dysfunction, even other conditions which does not have a particular lesion in the brain or any other systems as such. So that is why diagnosis is very important. So here I'll be dealing with how does this vestibular system develops, and when does this vestibular system develop in a child, from in utero to the child development. So when and how this vestibular system develops, and we'll just see the basic definitions of the common symptoms that I was talking about, that is dizziness and vertigo. So we will see the definitions of those two symptoms, and then we will see about the prevalence. So how the prevalence has paved a way that it is the need for the hour that we are supposed to start taking or start performing more of a screening among children. And next is about the vestibular dysfunction. So I'll be just talking about the common vestibular dysfunctions that are seen in children, and we'll just see a few about a little about the assessment and the treatment part. So that is why here I'll be talking about more of diagnosis, as I already told you. So and another thing is that if you diagnose a child with a wrong condition, or even an adult with wrong condition, what if, for example, if you give a treatment for a child, you try to give a balance exercise, for example. So what happens if, or for example, if you're going to use a particular technique in a child, so after some time you do not get the outcome that you have expected. So what do? You only go to changing of the treatment, but you do not go back to the assessment. So that is where, as a physiotherapist, we actually lack. We do not more often go back to the assessment part, which is actually a major part. So as I already told you, only based upon the diagnosis or the assessment, you will be able to give an appropriate treatment. So in order to diagnose a child or any condition among children, you're supposed to know the basics, what is the function of the vestibular system, and also how does this develop. So what happens during the development of a vestibular system in a child. And as I told you, we'll also see about the vestibular dysfunction. So these are the common symptoms, as I already told, dizziness and vertigo. So though these two terminologies are being used interchangeably, these two have different meanings, and these two definitely has a different cause. Whereas dizziness is commonly seen in many conditions. It can be a cardiovascular condition, it can be a neurological condition. Dizziness can always be present in other conditions also. So whereas vertigo, if you see a child or if you see an adult with vertigo, then it is completely directed towards a vestibular function problem. So that is about the difference between the dizziness and vertigo. So how does a child with dizziness feel, and how does a child with vertigo feel? So dizziness is described as disturbed sense of relationship to the space. So the child usually feels usually has difficulty in orienting to the space. Those are the common terms that they use. And next is about the vertigo. So in case of vertigo, this is where a child will feel as if something around the child is rotating, and the child himself is also rotating. Similar to if we go in a giant wheel or if we go in a merry-go-round, how do we feel? So the environment around us is also rotating, and we are also rotating. That is how a vertigo patient will actually feel. So it is actually hallucination of movement, which is where the child is not spinning and even the surrounding is not spinning or moving. The child just has an illusion. So that's about the difference or explanation about the two common symptoms that we often see in a child with vestibular dysfunction. So now we'll see about the prevalence. So as I already told you, only after 2014, it was thought, or it was more evidence came up with the prevalence of vertigo or dizziness or vestibular dysfunction among children. So I'll use these three terms throughout the session. Dizziness, vertigo, both means vestibular dysfunction only. As I already told you, dizziness also has other causes. But here, if I talk about dizziness, it is only going to pertain to the vestibular dysfunction. So as I already told you, only after 2014, more studies came up related to the prevalence of vestibular dysfunction in children. So if you see, actually, even in adult population, it is a scenario, but it came even more earlier. Whereas adult population, if they have vertigo or dizziness, they often do not go and report all these. Only when they have a major problem, only then they go to a ENT or a physician and then report their problems. So if you see among a common population, so one in 100 people definitely would have undergone, or 1 in 50 people would have definitely undergone an episode of vertigo or dizziness throughout their life. So that is how the comparison goes. And next, as I was talking about the prevalence, so in 2010 it was found that less than 1% of the children were having this vestibular dysfunction. So this was a retrospective study which was done among which included more than reports of more than 5 lakh children. So that among those 5 lakh children, only 0.4% of the children were found to have a history of vestibular dysfunction or balance problems. So actually, the limitations of this study was thought that only children who came to hospital were actually reported, and only children who had the history of vestibular dysfunction were actually documented. So that was one of the limitations. As I already told you, though there are not many studies that has been done. So if you see in the second study that was done in 2016, there is a vast difference. So over a period of 6 years, do you think this might have happened? No, it is because of the lack of the knowledge, or in better terms, the lack of awareness that even children might have this particular vestibular dysfunction. This particular awareness was actually lacking among the medical professions. I would say that is a reason because of this prevalence. And also we have other causes that might be because of increase in screen timing, because the childs these days are actually pampered, are not given enough of environmental input. We have other reasons also. So I put this as one of the important reason. And so this was actually studied in children's between 3 to 17 years, where the parents were actually explained more about the dizziness, or how the child would actually feel. Where did the child complain of any similar episodes? So the parents were actually explained even more detailed about the symptoms. So the other study was done in the year 2019, which also showed similar results to the previous study that was done in 2016. So it was found as 5.6%. So this 5.6% in numbers meant 3.3 million children between 3.3 million children to 3.5 million children. So don't you think this is really more prevalent among children population? So that is why it is more important. We always look at the developed countries as if you apply those scenarios in our countries, it would almost be applicable. So next, coming to the Indian scenario. So these are the studies which was actually published in United States. So now coming to India. So if you see in India, we are still lacking behind, and I would say there is almost 0 to 5% of awareness about vestibular dysfunction in pediatrics or in children. It's because there are very minimal studies being done in India. If I just went through the PubMed and other resources for the past 1 week, and I just got hardly 1 or 2 articles which was done among Indian children for vestibular dysfunction. So if you see with the prevalence, with more prevalence, and yet we haven't diagnosed a child with, you think there are no children with the symptoms of vertigo or dizziness in our scenario. There are children, but the problem is it is not often reported. So that is where we are supposed to understand this more and more, and we are supposed to go to the public and actually diagnose or screen children with this particular condition. So now we'll see the basics about the vestibular system. So from the day we are born until we reach old age or until death, I would say, so we completely rely upon the sense of balance for our well-being, and even better terms for our survival. So we only rely upon all these sense of balance for our well-being, right? So this balance is a complex interaction between the vestibular function, then the visual system, and the proprioception. So these are the 3 important systems. So only when the interaction happens between these 3 systems, we get a good balance, or a good balance is achieved. So and the connection between these 3 should be proper, and it should be developed completely. So next is the sensory systems. So sensory systems here, I mean about the vestibular system. So vestibular system is completely developed at birth, which means it is structurally completely developed. So our inner ear, outer ear, and the middle ear. So the structures of all these ears are completely developed once the child is born. That is around 39 weeks of gestation. So functionally, what happens? Functionally, only after the child starts growing, that is once the child starts moving. So this child starts moving only after 1 or 2 months. I mean 2 months, right? From rolling to then reaching for activities such as crawling and walking. So these are the activities which actually require movement. So only once the child starts moving, the sensory systems, I mean the vestibular systems, actually develop. So that is about the function. So from infancy, only from the infancy period, balance function starts maturing, and the maximum duration, or the time when it attains the complete maturation is 15 years. And this changes, or the balance function is acquired maximum by around, so maximum by around, I mean the balance functions are maximum achieved or attained during the infancy and preschool period. So infancy, which means during 0 to 1 year of age, and preschool, which means 2 to 5 years. So these are the ages or years by which the child achieves maximum balance function. So balance function such as walking is an important balance function, so an important milestone, so that is achieved during the infancy, right? So next we'll see about the outline of vestibular system. I'm not going into details, so I'm just giving you the functions. What are the basic structures in the vestibular system? I'm only talking about the vestibular part of the vestibular system. So we have it is a sensory motor system which detects the motion, the head position, and spatial orientation. So these are the information that are received by these organs, and it is sent to the higher centers. So only after it reaches the higher centers, then we have the motor functions such as balance. We start maintaining the balance, and we stabilize our head. So these are the motor functions which are done once our sensory system receives all these informations. And so this vestibular system is based upon this, we can understand that this vestibular system is very essential to maintain movement and equilibrium. So now we'll see the parts of the ear or the vestibular system. So we have, so 1 second. So we have the external ear, the middle ear, and this is what we will be seeing today. That is, so the entire part is the inner ear, and this is our vestibular labyrinthine, and this is what we will be seeing in detail now. And this is the semicircular canals, and this is the cochlea. Okay, so as I already told you, this is the vestibular part, and this is the cochlea. So this is the one that helps us in taking up information to the brain, all the sensations to the brain, and also this is the one which helps us maintain all the positions if there is any movement that from the normal movement. So this is the important organ which detects all the change in the movement or in position. So these are the 3 semicircular canals, and so we have 3 semicircular canals: anterior semicircular canal or superior semicircular canal. Then we have the horizontal semicircular canal or the lateral semicircular canals, and we have a posterior semicircular canals. These 3 semicircular canals detects each movement. So, for example, such as flexion, that is forward movements, is done by 1 second. Yes. Okay. So I guess you can see clearly what are the 3 semicircular canals. So this is the superior semicircular canal, which detects the movement performed in forward direction. That is flexion in our terms, flexion or forward movements. And the horizontal canal takes care of the side flexion movements, and the posterior canal takes care of the nodding movements or shaking the head. So these are the different movements that is taken care by these 3 semicircular canals. And we have something called as ampulla, which is an inflated part of the semicircular canal. So all these 3 semicircular canals have these inflated part, that is ampulla. So then we also have something called as otolith organs. So these semicircular canals takes care of all the rotational movements, and this otolith organ takes care of the movements that is performed in linear direction. So I'll repeat once again. So all these 3 semicircular canals, if you have any doubts in the anatomy, you can please send in the chat box, because at first even I had difficulties before 5 years. Even I had really difficult time when learning about all these anatomy of vestibular system. And other important thing is, as a physiotherapist, we are not given much about, or we are not taught much about the vestibular system at all. So if it is difficult for you guys to understand, please you can send in the chat or unmute yourself and stop me and ask me any doubts. Okay, because if you do not understand this, it might be difficult for you to understand the later steps. Okay, so this is about the three semicircular canals which I was talking. So those three semicircular canal takes care of the rotational movements, whereas these two otolith organs takes care of the linear movements such as moving forward, backward, moving sidewards, and all those things. So that is taken care by this otolith organs. And okay, I was talking about the ampulla, right? Now we'll see about ampulla. So this is the inflated part of an ampulla, and we have hair cells. So in the hair cells are present in this is called as the crista. So where the hair cells are embedded, and we have the cupula. This is the entire part is called as ampulla, and this is called as cupula. And we also have endolimb. Okay, so this endolimb is a fluid which detects the motions. Okay, so these are then which is actually a fluid that is present inside the semicircular canal. And we have, as I already told you, this is the entire part is the ampulla, which is the inflated area which we saw in the previous slide. And this is we call it as cupula, which is present inside the ampulla, and the cupula is the one which separates, yes, so which separates between the endolimb or endolimb fluid getting inside the hair cells. Okay, so this is called as cupula, and this is one second. Okay, so that's about the endolimb. So it is a fluid which is present in the semicircular canal, and we also have the cupula. And next we have crista, as I already told you. So crista is the sensory organ. So this is a sensory organ which actually sends all the information that is received to the higher centers. So that is the function of crista, which is a sensory organ. And so now we'll see about that was about the vestibular labyrinth, and this is about the otolith organs. So otolith organ, there are two otolith organs, that is article and saccule. So article, which detects all the horizontal movements, that is forward and backward, and whereas saccule detects all the movements that is performed vertically. And next we have this is a side view of the otolith organs. Okay, so we also have hair cells similar to the one which we saw in the vestibular labyrinth. We also have same hair cells in the otolith organs also. So this is a macula. Okay, so as we already saw crista, that is a sensory organ which is present in the vestibular labyrinth. We have macula here, which is a sensory organ for the article and saccule. Okay, so to detect all the horizontal and vertical movements. Okay, and we have something called as this macula actually sends all the information to the higher centers, whereas this otoconia is the one which receives all the information. So this information regarding the position. So this otoconia is are small crystals which is made up of calcium carbonate. So only when these these calcium crystals move, so we are able to detect movements. Okay, so that's about the otolith organs. So that's the basics about the vestibular system. So now coming to the how vestibular system, visual system, and auditory processing or auditory system should act in hand in hand for a better or for a good motor development in children. So we have this visual system and auditory system. So if a child, so the vestibular system cannot act independently. It is supposed to act along with other sensory systems to give a better or adequate motor output. So vestibular system, as I already told you, should act along with the other sensory systems. For example, if a child wants to look into board and write. So or if a teacher is actually telling something, the child, if the child has to respond or adapt himself accordingly, then the child requires auditory system, then look into what the teacher is telling, so visual system, and respond adequately, the vestibular system and the motor system, right? So everything has to act hand in hand, or we call it as a triangle. So in case of children's, it is a learning triangle. We can call it as a learning triangle, so which is made up of the auditory, the vision, and the motor skills, or the vestibulomotor skills. Okay, so as I already told you, this vestibular system helps the child in performing all activities such as climbing, swinging, walking, for example. So this is the triangle which actually helps the child in learning almost everything that is important for for to perform a good motor output or a movement. So it should act hand in hand. And as I already told you, for example, if a child has a target, so the child has to look into the board and write a few things, or write anything. The child requires to stabilize the gaze, that is to look onto the board, and the head also should be oriented. So then based upon the head orientation, the postural control should happen. So this is about the visual and vestibular system, so which should act hand in hand, so which helps the child in catching a ball, or tying a shoelace, so writing. So that is why children who have problems with vision also have problems in performing all these activities. And the child also might this actually also helps the child tracking the words. So any difficulties or any dysfunction in the visual system will also help the child, or will also lead the child, make the child difficult in writing, reading. These children will often skip a few words, a few letters when they write. It's not because they forget, it's because they are not able to visualize things, they are not able to see things and understand and then write. Okay, so again, next is about the auditory system. So as I already told you, auditory system should work along with the vestibular system. So after this class, you can actually try just closing your ears and then walk. So which would actually be very difficult for us to do, or there will be some compromise in walking normally and also closing the ears and walking. So that is how the information is received. Almost 80% of the cochlea is devoted for the reception and analysis of the sound from the environment. So that is how the information from the environment is actually important to perform a motor task or a skill. And only once the auditory system receives, and then the vestibular system sends all the information to the higher centers, we have the response such as postural control, postural muscles starts working. Okay, so that is how auditory system is important. So only when the child listens to more of auditory input, or gives in more of auditory input, vestibular system develops more and more. It also helps the child in attaining a timing, rhythm, and sequence of a particular movement, along with better balance, coordination, eye muscle control. So I hope you understood. So it should act as a triangle, that is everything should act hand in hand. If there is any problem with, so you can also imagine as a cycle, if there is any cut in between, obviously the other two, or at least this one part is going to be affected, and at last the child is going to have problems in performing both the aerials and the activities in the school. So coming to when does all these vestibular pathways develop? So around 21st week or 21 weeks of gestation, vestibular ganglion cells starts developing. So it starts actually developing by 9th week of gestation, that is after few weeks of conception, 9th week of gestation. By 21 weeks they have different shapes, as we have different organs, the vestibular labyrinth, and we have the cochlea, the inner ear, outer ear. So we have different parts of a ear, right? So all these develop during starts developing around 9th week. By around 21 weeks, all are in different shapes. So once all are in different shapes, it starts it helps in myelination of the vestibular nerve and inner ear. Next, inner ear is okay, inner ear is developed or starts developing around 21 weeks of gestation, and ganglion cells. So ganglion cells actually completes the development around 40 weeks of gestation or by birth. As you remember, I already told you, structurally, the vestibular system is developed completely by around birth or 40 weeks of gestation. So this is what I meant. Ganglion cells are completed, developed completely by around 39th weeks. And if you see, vestibular nerve actually starts myelination by around 20th week. And this is the first nerve, that is first cranial nerve to complete myelination, which actually states that, which tells how important this vestibular system is. And by around 12 to 24 weeks, the labyrinth, the neuronal connections, that is from the vestibular labyrinth to the higher centers, that is the brainstem and the cerebellum, we have different connections, right? So those connections are being formed during this period, that is 12 to 24 weeks of gestation. And next, about the postural and oculomotor control, that was during in utero, and this is during the birth, after the birth of a child. So visual system in relation to the postural system is completed by around 7.5 years. And so this by around 1 year or so, or even till 7.5 years, the child completely relies upon the visual system to actually stand or a postural control during standing. And next is vestibulo-ocular mechanism. So this is effective, or such as gaze stabilization is mature around 1 year or so. And next we have a vestibular system. So vestibular system as such matures around 3 years. I'm just talking about a few, as I told you, the gaze stabilization. I'm talking in relation to the gaze and visual stabilization. And next we have vestibulospinal mechanism, which is again effective by around or completely developed by around 15 years or so. Then we have sensory integration capacity, which is developed between 7 and 15 years. So that is, as I already told you, only by 15 years or so, the child's vestibular system is completely developed. Okay. So now about the important reflexes that we all know in case of vestibular system, that is vestibulo-ocular reflex and vestibulospinal reflex and vestibulocochlear reflex. So balance and equilibrium are maintained through a series of sensory inputs, right? So once a sensory input is received from the vestibular system, visual system, and somatosensory system, these informations or inputs are directed to the vestibular nuclei, which is vestibular nuclei and cerebellum. for processing. So once all these informations from the sensory systems are taken to the higher centers, so what happens in response? So we have few reflexes. Okay, so if your ocular muscles are stimulated, then we call it as so based upon the reflex, based upon the response, these reflexes are stimulated or responded. So we have vestibulo-ocular reflex, vestibulospinal reflex, as I told you, vestibulo-colic reflex. So, for example, if a child, or if somebody is calling you, when we turn to the right side, or if any whichever side we receive the information, so when you turn to one side, vestibular ocular reflex helps us in stabilizing or look into whichever called us, and the vestibulospinal reflex is going to maintain the posture, the controlled posture of other muscles, whereas the vestibulocolic reflex is going to maintain the head or stabilize head in a particular position. So that is the reflexes. That is how these three reflexes act or work on. So we'll just go in detail about the reflexes, as I already told you. So vestibulo-ocular reflex stabilizes the gaze. The important or the purpose of vestibulo-ocular reflex is to stabilize gaze or fix our vision. In better terms, you just have to fix your vision, and when not only during a stable posture, but also when we move our head, we also a stabilization also is required. Stabilization of the vision is also required, right? So those are being maintained or taken care by this vestibulo-ocular reflex. So whichever as I told you, if a person wishes to see something, then those information is received through the fovea, that is the visual system, and from the semicircular canals and the otolith organs, it goes to the higher centers. So this vestibulo-ocular reflex is present at birth also. So if there is any problem with the vestibular ocular reflex, that reflects as the child having difficulty in stabilizing vision, the child might have a blurred vision, and this is actually an important reflex which helps the child in focus in a particular object, and then do all the other movements. So next we have the vestibulospinal reflex. So this reflex stabilizes the body and maintains postural control. So even if the body is in a stationary position or during a movement, the afferent signals, that is the inputs from the vision or vestibular system, is always being detected, and it is sent to the higher centers. So detecting the body's orientation during during a stability and during a motion is always being detected, and it is sent to the higher centers. So once it reaches to the higher centers, so it reaches the higher centers through these three pathways, that is which includes the lateral, medial, and reticulospinal tracts. So in turn, the reflexes. So once it is stimulated, the higher centers sends information, and it activates the myotatic deep tendon reflexes, so which is present in the muscles, and thereby our posture is being maintained. So this, as I already told you, posture, if you remember in the previous slide where we saw about the development of vestibular system, the visual system in relation in relation to postural control during the development of a child, where we saw around 15 years only the postural control develops. The child attains postural control by around 15 years or so. So next about the vestibulocholic reflex. So now that when we look into something, our eyes are fixed and our heads are, so we receive all the information when we actually move. Our postural muscles are stabilized. What happens to the head? So the head also should be stabilized. So for that reason, we have this vestibulocholic reflex. So this stabilizes vision by compensating for by head movements when the body is actually in motion. So an example is while walking, the vestibular signals are received. That is, it stimulates all the nerve receptors, and the saccule stimulates. Saccule, if you remember, it is a part of the otolith organs. So those are actually stimulated, and it transmits the information to the vestibular nerve through the vestibular nerve, and thereby all the muscles in the cervical region react or respond. So that is how the vestibulocholic reflex acts. So now that we have seen the basic about how it happens and how the vestibular system develops. So here we'll see about the developmental reflexes, which is present during the infantile period, which plays a major role during the development of the child during the infant period, which also helps in balance and impairments. If there is any, so reflexes are basically a protective mechanism, right? So it is to a stimuli. For a sensory stimuli, we have a motor response. So that is what we call as a reflex. So developmental reflexes means which are present at birth, which helps the child in performing the motor activities. So we have a few reflexes: motor reflex, tonic, head righting, vertical acceleration, parachute reaction, and Doll's eye response. So these are the reflexes, which are a few are present at birth and few are developed around 4 to 5 months. So once these reflexes are actually present, these reflexes should be integrated. Apart from 2 to 3 reflexes, all other reflexes should be integrated. Only if those reflexes are disappeared, we call it as there is a we call it as the child is actually developing. If the child has any delay, or if the child has any problems with integration of all these reflexes, then it might suggest the child has some balance impairments. So we have other reflexes also, but these are the reflexes which play a major role in balance, in attaining a balance. So the first reflex, Moro. So in case of Moro reflex, it is elicited. So the child is placed, or the child's trunk is almost flexed for about 30 degrees, and the head of the child is actually dropped suddenly. So when the head of the child is dropped suddenly, what happens is the child's upper limb goes for extension. So abduction and extension, which is a protective response. So if the child, this should be integrated around 5 to 6 months. If the reflex is persistent, or if it is not integrated even by 5 to 6 months, then we call it as a delay, or the child might have problems with maturation. So these children will have poor balance, poor coordination, and they are able to get adapted to the environment, as this reflex is going to stimulate the cristae in the semicircular canals. So this particular stimulation, or stimulating the cristae in the semicircular canals, should be stopped at a certain age. So next we have tonic neck reflex. So in case of tonic neck reflex, so this is also a reflex which helps the child in flexing, extending, and turning. Then in case of, we have two reflexes. One is the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. So this is a asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. And then we have symmetrical tonic neck reflex. So in case of asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, if the child's head is turned to one side actively or passively, so that the same side head, the same side upper limb goes for extension, and in case of opposite side upper limb goes for flexion. So this is one of the reflex which helps in building up hand-eye coordination in children in the later stages. And next we have this is the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. So here the child, we do it, we elicit this reflex in two ways. So first is the child, when you actually extend the child, this can be done in a sitting position also. So the other position is horizontal suspension, where the tummy, the child is held on the tummy. So the child's head goes for extension, the upper limb goes for extension, and the lower limb goes for flexion. Whereas in case of the second image, so this is also how it can be elicited. So there is a flexion of the head, and there is up flexion of the upper limb, and the lower limb goes for extension. So only because of the presence of this particular reflex, a child attains sitting, independent sitting. So if the child has any delay or integration in the delay of this particular reflex, then definitely that is going to lead to poor muscle tone. The child will have difficulty in developing independent sitting or even dependent sitting. So that is those are things that happens in case of retained STNR, that is symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Next we have the head writing reflex. So in case of head writing reflex, so this head writing reflex helps the child in performing rolling, sitting, standing activities. So this reflex occurs only by around 4 to 6 years, as I already 6 months. Sorry, as I already told you, not all the reflexes are present at birth. There are few reflexes which are also present or occurs around 4 to 6 months. So here there are many reflexes in case of a labyrinth reflexes, that is head writing reflex, where the child's head is turned to one side and the body tries to rotate to the same side. So that is about one reflex. So this helps the child in performing, helps in a better balance and coordination when the child is put under a different situation, that is unstable surface. Then this is the reflex that helps the child in detecting the unstable surface and helps in maintaining the equilibrium or balance. So if a child has problem with this reflexes, then that again can lead to in coordination when a child plays, because they have problems with balance. And next is vertical acceleration. So in case of vertical acceleration, it is similar to Moro reflex. The child is actually pushed or moved downwards, and this actually similar to the Moro reflex, as I already told you, and it stimulates the article, that is the macula of the article. And next we have the parachute reflex, a reaction which is present only after 5 months, once the vestibular systems start developing. And this is also known as a sentinel reaction, and this can be elicited if the child is pushed actually towards the ground in a prone position. So what happens is the child actually goes for abduction of the upper limb and tries to touch the ground as a protective response, and the upper limb and the head also goes for extension. So next, this is one of the important response, which is actually the vestibulo-ocular reflex in adults. So if the child is moved towards one side, for example, the child here is moved towards the right side or the left side, the head or the eyes move towards the opposite side in order to maintain that particular position or to actually look into the other side. So this is about the doll's eye phenomenon, or this is the vestibulo-ocular reflex. So now coming to the indications. Now that we know what are the different problems that the child might have, and what are the normal things that the child should have during the developmental period. We will see what happens if the child has vestibular dysfunction. So these are few indications. First is dizziness, as we already know, dizziness and vertigo. So if the child is found to have a dizziness or visual acuity problems, such as when the child has problems with turning, when the child is trying to look at something, so that is visual acuity problems. And next is poor spatial relationships. So when a child performs a skipping activity, or when a child actually reads or writes letters, the child skips few words or few letters. So that means the child is not oriented to the spatial space. So next is nystagmus. So nystagmus is involuntary, alternating rapid and slow eye movements. So these movements are usually sorry, so these movements are usually seen as an abnormality. So it is an involuntary a movement of the eyes or eyeballs, which occurs as a response of abnormality, or when there is a deviation from the normal. And next, if a child has any difficulty in navigating in the dark, we often have the ability to actually go into dark. For example, if there is a power cut, for few moments we'll not be able to look at the other person or look what is there in the particular place. But after some time, our visual field is completely adapted to that dark environment, and we start navigating or moving even in that dark space. So that is called as navigating in the dark, which is all present in all the human beings. So if the child has difficulty in navigating in the dark, then that can be an indication of vestibular dysfunction. Next, we have the hearing loss or tinnitus. If the child has problems with receiving all the sounds, and tinnitus, or other words, which means a sound, a keying sound, which is present for a longer duration in the ears. So if that is present, then that can be an indication that the child might have a vestibular dysfunction. And next, if the child has a motion sickness, so usually a sensitivity, often adults also have these, more children have. For example, if the child is traveling in a bus, or especially to see when someone is traveling in the terrain or mountain areas. So when they perform all those moments, the patient or the child has a sensation of nausea. So that is called as motion sickness, which is often adapted by few people, and which often becomes normal once that particular movement is stopped. And next is abnormal movement patterns, unsteady gait, clumsiness, or poor posture. So abnormal movement patterns, and this unsteady gait, which is also a indication of balance problem, right? Which can lead to increase tendency to fall, or lean, or fall onto something. So those are the problems that occurs in case of abnormal movement patterns. And next, we have increase in the ear pressure, which can be because of காது அடைச்சுக்கிச்சுன்னு சொல்லுவோம்ல. So that is called as increase in ear pressure. And we also have headaches associated with nausea. And again, coming to the developmental and reflex delays. So this is the one which we are supposed to be concerned. But a child with developmental and reflex delays are will more often be directed towards us, because they do at times have a definitive cause. So for each and every child there might be a few functions. Not all of these might be present. Few children might have few indications and the other child might not have. Coming to the other symptoms, so these were the symptoms that we have seen. So these children might also present with behavioral issues, as these children have as I already told you, there is an interlink between the vestibular system and other sensory systems. So the children might also have behavioral issues. So if you see dizziness, as I already told you, dizziness and vertigo are just symptoms, and it is not a diagnosis. So if a child experiences, but the child who has these problems often have problems with explaining their experience. That is, as you already, that is very difficult. So that is where it becomes very hard for us to, or for a physiotherapist or for any medical professional to differentiate between the dizziness and vertigo, or whether the child has a vestibular problem or a higher central problem. So often older children are able to explain, whereas the younger children are not able to. And so now coming to why do we test a vestibular system in children? So now that we know, there are a few other reasons, such as a child might have vestibular problems. So other terms is where to determine the site of lesion. So if there is a vestibular system, if only when we assess this vestibular system, that can actually tell us which other part is affected. Then if you have diagnosed it at the earlier stage, then a delay can be prevented. Often there is a problem even with the cognition, so that can be prevented. And next is to determine the rehabilitation. So only if you diagnose the right things, you will be able to give a proper rehabilitation or a management. Then to rule out significant diagnosis, so we have other causes also. To rule out other causes, we are supposed to examine this vestibular system. And if the child, so if you will be seeing in the further slides that sensory neural loss, that is children who have congenital hearing loss, definitely need a cochlear implant, right? So these children's almost 30 to 40 percentage or 50 percentage of the children with hearing loss do have vestibular impairments or vestibular dysfunction. So that is where you're supposed to analyze and observe or assess, so that though we don't play much role in choice of cochlear implant, so audiologist plays a major role. So we can also, so our role will be after a surgery especially. And next is to alleviate fears among families, as we are the ones who often see the parents of children's. So we are supposed to give them confidence that this is depending upon the observation or assessment. We are supposed to give confidence to the parents that what issue it is, and what can actually be done. So next is the common diagnosis. Now coming to what are the common conditions that are actually seen in children. So we have BPVC, which is benign paroxysmal vertigo in children and migraine, and otitis media, sensory neural hearing loss, developmental disabilities and prematurity, and benign paroxysmal torticollis of infancy, vestibular neuritis and labyrinthinitis, and ototoxicity. Then Meniere's disease. Then we also have perilimb fistula, and we have enlarged vestibular aqueduct syndrome, and benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. So here on the left we have these are the common conditions that are seen in children. So I have just placed it in the order that is affected by with in children. So common ones that are seen in children is BPVC. And if you see, we have the rare conditions here. And in case of rare conditions, I hope you are able to notice the benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. This is the common condition that is seen in adults, whereas this is one of the least common conditions which is seen in the children's. And if you see another condition in the common area, we have benign paroxysmal vestibular problems in children, benign paroxysmal vertigo in children. So this is not a variant, this is not at all a variant of this benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. Whereas in case of benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, the adults have the problem with the otolimb, or to be specific, the otoconia. So only when there is a displacement in the otoconia, they have this benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. But in children, it is just called as benign paroxysmal vertigo, which means there is no definitive cause. There are few studies which states it can be a higher center problem also. So that's about the condition. We'll just see all these things in detail now. First is benign paroxysmal vertigo in children. So this is as I already told you, it is one of the commonest cause which is seen in children. It is not same as BPPV at all. So this is seen in children between 3 to 7 or 8 years old, and here the vertigo is the common symptom that is seen in case of benign paroxysmal vertigo in children. So where the child does not have any associated headache, but the child has a vertigo which actually remains less than 10 minutes. And next we have migraine. So migraine is the second most common cause of vertigo. So the difference between the migraine and this paroxysmal vertigo is, in case of migraine, the vertigo may last for days and may last for hours and days. So because of the headache, along with the headache. So that is where we will be able to distinguish between the BPVC and migraine. Otitis media. So next is otitis media, which is associated with conductive hearing loss and speech delay. So otitis media is an infection of the middle ear. So in the middle ear, we only have air-filled space. So when that area is infected, then we call it as otitis media. It can be present with or without effusion. So when a child has this particular infection, then that causes balance impairments and dizziness. Obviously, in all the maximum children who have otitis media, they present with balance problems and dizziness. Along with that, those children also have conductive hearing loss. And also the mechanism is usually clear. It is usually unclear, as it is a infection. And in case of balance impairments, this electronephronography is the common assessment that is being done, or it is evaluated using this electronephronography. And sensory neural loss. In case of sensory neural loss, neural hearing loss, we have hearing loss that occurs due to any damage in the inner ear or to the vestibulocochlear nerve. So in case of sensory neural hearing loss, we see a concurrent bilateral vestibular hypofunction. So both the vestibular systems are functioning less than what is expected. That is what we call as hypofunction. And in case of so the 70% of children with sensory neural loss have peripheral vestibular dysfunction. So as I already told you, maybe I was just I told the lowest amount. So it is actually 70%. 70% of the children who have this hearing loss will have a peripheral vestibular dysfunction. So which can also be this sensory neural hearing loss can also be due to particular infections, that is rubella and congenital abnormalities in utero during the uterine life. And this condition does not present with any vertigo or nystagmus, as it is commonly a congenital condition. And you remember this vestibulo-ocular reflex, and in this condition children have impaired vestibulo-ocular reflex. So as I already told you, only when you hear some sound, you just turn to that particular side and your head gets stabilized. So once this sensory neural loss is present, this vestibulo-ocular reflex is also impaired. Next, coming to the developmental disabilities and prematurity. So developmental disability and prematurity is in children who have born before the expected duration, before the gestational period, and we call them as premature babies and low birth weight babies. So and also if they have any learning disabilities, so obviously many learning disability children might have or could be diagnosed with vestibular dysfunction. Unless or until we put them in a diagnosis or include them in assessment, we will not be able to find out whether a child has a vestibular dysfunction or not. And these children often have problems with skipping, riding a bicycle, which is in case with DCD. So DCD is another common condition all the symptoms are usually similar to children that you see in DCD. And if there is a delay in the maturation of the vestibular system, so as I already told you, children who were born before the gestational period or the exact gestational period and who were born with less weight or low birth weight will definitely have, or maximum might have, delay in the maturation of vestibular system. So that it can lead to all these other problems. So those children will also have vestibular problems such as problems with skipping, riding bicycle, writing, problems more with coordination, which includes coordination. Next, we have a benign paroxysmal torticollis of infancy. So here there is a recurrent episodes of head tilt. So this commonly occurs because of migraine in children. So this is not like congenital torticollis. So even if congenital torticollis is released later, those children might also have problems with vestibular function. So here I'm talking about the benign, that is a sudden problem of torticollis, where the child goes for more of head tilt. So because the child often complains migraine because of the headache, the child often goes for one-sidedness. So this often results or shows vomiting, pallor, agitation, and ataxia. And coming to the vestibular neuritis and labyrinthinitis. So dizziness, hearing symptoms. So dizziness is a common symptom of vestibular neuritis, whereas in case of labyrinthinitis, both dizziness and hearing loss are commonly seen. Next, vertigo and nausea are also one of the symptoms in are also one of the symptoms in these conditions, and it usually subsides within 4 to 6 weeks with adequate medications. And viral infection of trigeminal ganglion is the cause for vestibular neuritis and labyrinthinitis. So if So this trigeminal ganglion is a collection of nerve cells which is located just behind the ear, or it is usually caused by bacterial infection or viral infection. Next, we have ototoxicity, which is ear poisoning, which also causes a severe imbalance. So, okay, if you see here, it as it subsides by 4 to 6 weeks, do you think really these children require vestibular rehabilitation? Only if these children are not having a subsidation of all these symptoms, then we go with the rehabilitation aspect. Not often all these, if a child has vestibular neuritis or labyrinthinitis, not 100 out of 100 children are completely recovered. They definitely have some residual problems such as dizziness or vertigo even after enough of medications, even after 4 to 6 weeks. So that is when physiotherapist or rehabilitation plays a major role. And next is ototoxicity, as I was talking. So ototoxicity, which is otherwise called as ear poisoning, which is caused by medications that destroy the hair cells, which is present in the inner ear. So as I already told you, these are the one that is going to transmit signals to the upper, that is higher centers. So that is being damaged by this particular by a group of drugs. So that is obviously going to result in conditions or difficulties, such as the child might have frequent falls, visual motor problems, which might include oscillopsia, which means the child might have blurred vision, not a clear vision. So blurred vision is also a symptom that happens or occurs along with the dizziness in children. And then coming to the last common condition, that is computer vision syndrome. So we often know, based upon all the previous instructions, you might have known that there is major or maximum role of vestibular system is to stabilize the vision and take care of the head position, right? And it plays a major role. So what happens if a child sits in front of, or when the child is fixed in a particular place and continuous visual inputs are being triggered? So and this computer vision syndrome occurs. So in this if a child sits in front of a system, not even child, even if an adult is sitting in front of a system for a very long time, a computer or a TV or so in a particular position, obviously that is going to cause this computer vision syndrome. So this is often seen in children recently, only recently, because of increase in the screen time. So management would be to decrease the screen time, and if they have problems with the screen time, obviously those children are not going to have a good learning feel, or these children will also have difficulties in writing and reading aspects. So those should definitely be taken care of. And next, coming to the diagnosis, as I already told you in initially, so it is often difficult to diagnose a vestibular dysfunction or balance disorder, so which was actually perceived to be present or being affected only in the adults earlier, during the earlier stage. And the second thing, this also I already told you, where we are not given adequate training during our educational period about the vestibular system and the role that we actually have in treating a child with vestibular dysfunction. So that is one of the other reason because of which the diagnosis become difficult. And third reason is adults only are able to communicate the problems that they have, whereas children are often not able to communicate the problems they have, and or differentiate between dizziness and vertigo or headache, etc. And next is dizziness cannot be tested in laboratory. So if you see when a child complains of dizziness, or even adult complains of dizziness or vertigo, it is only a refractory measurement, which means it is subjective. You cannot go with objective assessment. You cannot just have some instrument and go with the objective assessment with dizziness or vertigo. So that is one of the important reason why it becomes very difficult to diagnose a child with dizziness. Even it becomes harder to diagnose in case of adults when compared to adults. Children's, in case of children's, it becomes even more difficult. So that's about why it is difficult to diagnose, and I'll also tell you how to diagnose. And this is just the algorithm of how you can diagnose. First, you check for the nature of the symptom, whether it is acute or a chronic problem, whether the child has vertigo or dizziness. So if the child has vertigo, or if the child has dizziness or acute or chronic, check whether the child has a hearing loss or no. If the child has hearing loss, then if for example the sensory neural hearing loss, obviously the child is going to have a sensory a balance dysfunction or balance problems. So then go with whether child had any history of fever. Then if the child had history of fever, then it could possibly be a labyrinthitis or a head trauma. And if whether the child had any ototoxic drugs because of head trauma. And next, diagnosing based upon the age. If the child is lesser than 5 years of age or more than 5 years of age, as migraine or vestibular headaches are common in children more than 5 years, if you remember in the earlier slides we saw. And next is BPV, that is benign position paroxysmal vertigo, which is seen in children between 3 to 7 or 8 years. And so these are this is just a basic algorithm based upon which you can just have the questions. You can shoot out questions this way to the parents and take up the information. So coming to the evaluation, so the first person to evaluate would be a physician. So a physician, next, the children are often referred to a specialist such as otolaryngologist or otologist, and only after they are referred based upon the symptoms or what we have to assess, they go for if the child has a problem with the hearing or more of balance problems along with hearing, then he is referred to the audiologist. And if the child has any problems with hand-eye coordination and more of functional problems, then they are referred to physiotherapist or occupational therapist. So these are the common tests that is being done to find out whether the child has a vestibular problem or not. So electronystagmography or a video nystagmography. So this is the one which is designed to determine if the child has a peripheral, unilateral or bilateral damage. Okay, so those are determined by the electronystagmography or video nystagmography. And then we have the vestibular evoked potential, and also yes, it has the ability to check the semicircular canals. It helps in measuring the ability of semicircular canals, such as stabilizing vision when stimulus is given, the rotation of the head in different position. So those are the tests that is done if child if has vestibular dysfunction. So next is vestibular evoked myogenic potential. So this vestibular evoked myogenic potential, this tests the saccule and vestibular nerve. So Again, sensory inputs are given through earphones, and the electrodes are placed in the neck region, and the response is actually assessed. And next is balance and posture evaluation. So as a physiotherapist, we can just observe or assess balance and posture based upon our basic test. If you have to go about more of specified the specified investigation, then we can opt for computerized dynamic posturography. Okay, so next is standardized developmental motor scale. So this is balance and posture evaluations along with standardized developmental motor scale are the aspects which are being used by a physiotherapist. So standardized developmental motor scales are going to which comprises of the hand-eye coordination that assesses hand-eye coordination, eye-foot coordination, balance activities, fine motor tasks. So these are the things that can be evaluated in case of based upon few scales. So assessment. So these are the histories that can be taken when a child comes with the problems of vestibular dysfunction. First is assessing for or a history regarding the pregnancy and neonatal. So whether the mother had a problem during the pregnancy period, such as intrauterine infections, toxoplasmosis, rubella. As I already told you, the torch infections are common ones that is going to create problems in the pregnancy or for the neonate during the embryogenic period or fetal period. Next, during the neonatal period, the history during the neonatal period. So did the child have any asphyxia or jaundice or any respiratory distress, which because of which the child might so these are the informations which might rule in vestibular problems or vestibular dysfunction, and which might also rule out other conditions. Next, we are supposed to identify age appropriate motor milestones, and based upon the conditions which we have already seen, you're supposed to have a knowledge of all the conditions. And next is select appropriate questionnaire and assess balance quantitatively based upon the questionnaires. With the questionnaires. So next, these are the common conditions that which we have already seen. So we should be aware of what are the common condition. Now coming to the last part, that is the vestibular rehabilitation therapy. So as I already told you, in order to determine the effective treatment plan, you're supposed to evaluate and assess properly. So that is more vital, especially in case of children. So only if you have a good or a detailed assessment, you will be able to go with the vestibular rehabilitation therapy. So this comprises of, this also depends upon whether the child has a unilateral vestibular dysfunction or a bilateral vestibular dysfunction, or whether the child has a central problem or a peripheral problem. So those are things which we should be that should be taken into consideration. And the vestibular rehabilitation therapy comprises of the eye movement control, that is fixing the gaze, then dynamic visual acuity, such as moving the head in relation to fixing a gaze, then establishing or developing balance, and develop if the child has any problems with the integration of reflexes during the infantile period, then helping the child in integrating the reflexes. So that will be the one of the management. And next is a body function movement functions. So more of as I already told you, vestibular and auditory system lies hand in hand. So the more information is received from the auditory system. So the more movement the child performs, or the better movement the child performs. So again, exercises should be given based upon the age, interest, level of comprehension, and test results. Coming to the aspects that we will be dealing with is improving the visual motor control, improving balance, coordination, visual acuity, and promoting a normal development. So this ends my class or session. So thank you. Yes. We can start with the questions. Any doubts?
Yeah, few questions are there in chat box, ma'am, already. I'll read it out.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So first one is from Miss Jonada Lipika. Ma'am, please repeat vestibular labyrinth, ampulla, endolymph part, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, fine. So, yes. The anatomy. So this is, I'll just once again go with. So we have two parts, okay. In case of the inner ear, we have the vestibular part and the cochlear part. So cochlear part is completely responsible. So this is the cochlear part here. So this is completely responsible for all the inputs, that is all the sounds, everything, receiving all the sounds. And this is a vestibular labyrinth, which is responsible for detecting all the stimulus. So we have three semicircular canals, so which helps in detecting all the movements, as I already told you. So one is the anterior semicircular canal or superior semicircular canal, and we also have a horizontal or a lateral semicircular canal, and we also have a horizontal and a posterior semicircular canal. So we have an inflated part at the end of each semicircular canal, so which we call it as an ampulla. So this ampulla is the one which is going to detect the information. So it detects all the information, and within the ampulla we have something called as a crista. This is actually going to once all the inputs, I mean the information is received, these organs, sensory organs, are the ones that is going to send the information to the higher centers. So this is in terms with the semicircular canals, whereas in case of otolith organs, we have the macula as sensory organs, which takes up all the information to the higher centers. So we'll just go with the ampulla. We have the endolymph, that is the fluid that is present in the semicircular canal. If you can see in the previous image, so this is the endolymph. Okay, so this is the endolymph, which is the bluish color. So this is present throughout that particular fluid, that is endolymph, is present throughout the vestibular labyrinthine. So that is the one that detects the movement, that keeps moving when a particular when a person performs a movement, or when the head is moved suddenly. That is the one that keeps moving and sends the information here. That is the cupula. And the cupula, within the cupula only we have the extension of the hair cells, and if this endolymph is going to move into one direction, so this movement is going to create a detection of movement. Okay, that there is some movement happening in the head, and that is being sent to the higher centers. Okay.
Fine, ma'am.
Yes, sorry,
Next
sir.
one, fine,
Okay.
ma'am. Next one is from Miss Smita Rani. Can you please show again the postural and oculomotor control development slide, ma'am?
Okay. Yes. So I was talking. This is about the in utero, the development, what happens in utero, and this is once after the child grows. So these are not just a visual system. So the child will be able to look or see things immediately after the birth. But all these are the things which is in response to the postural control. How far are the muscles in response to the visual systems? The postural muscles are being controlled. So those are the ones that is being spoken here. Yes.
Fine, ma'am. Next one is from Ms. Umayal. Vestibular system is fully developed at birth or at 15 years? I am not.
Okay, fine. So what, as I already told you, vestibular system structurally is being completely developed during birth. Okay, which means all the organs in the ear is completely developed. That is structurally, all the organs are being present in the ear, but functionally it is completed only by 15 years. So you're supposed to understand between the structural and functional meanings. So structure means the anatomical part, and functional means how far the child is able to perform activities. So that is about function. So the function is only attained by a maximum of 15 years. Okay.
Fine,
okay.
Next one is from Ms. Kirna Savla. Ma'am, how is the prognosis of patients with vestibular dysfunction except labyrinthinitis?
Okay, it is about when we actually start diagnosing the child. If we diagnose the child or assess the child at the earliest, then as it is developing brain, you can expect vast changes if you address the problem at the right time and at the earliest. You can see beautiful changes in the improvement in terms of balance, and it can be academic activities and everything. The prognosis is really good if it is a peripheral lesion, which I mean, if there is a problem with the inner ear, the outer ear, and the middle ear, then definitely the prognosis is going to be really good. Almost near 99% of good results can be expected.
Fine, ma'am. Next one is from Mr. Satish Kumar. Ma'am, once repeat computer use the affected or diseased vestibular system?
Okay, you want me to repeat the computer vision syndrome once again? Fine. Okay, so this is one of the common problem that is being seen recently. So this commonly occurs in children or even in adults. Once you are used to looking at the screen for a prolonged time, so there is problem with the gaze fixation and also problem with how your head moves. So all these do not have enough of information which is received, which is taken to the higher centers, and that is obviously going to cause vertigo or dizziness. If you maximum of us could have experienced, if you sit for a prolonged time for hours together in front of a computer or a laptop working for your exams or something, at the end of the day you definitely would feel for about 2 to 3 days. If you've been using it continuously, then definitely you would have experienced something like dizziness or vertigo. Okay, so
next one is from Ms. Jonada. Any book references, ma'am?
Okay, book references. I haven't. I have actually taken references from many articles. For pediatric rehabilitation, there is no specific book, and which is actually there is a book by Herdman. So you can check that book, which has that is almost the one book which has a good information about the vestibular problems.
Fine, ma'am. Next one is from Ms. Abila Alexander. Ma'am, can you give information about more special scales for assessing as physiotherapist for vestibular rehab?
There are actually many scales. As I already told you, we have in order to assess balance for each and every aspect, we have different scales. For example, if you have to assess the balance part, you can go with a pediatric balance scale, or if you have to go with the overall assessment of a child, you can go with the strength and disability scale of a child. And in case of to assess the motor function, you can go with motor proficiency scales, and you can also go with other scales such as Bruinsky or Swesty scale. So these are the scales which talks about or which assesses the balance, coordination, the writing skills of the child.
Fine, ma'am. Any questions, participants? Any other questions?
I think no more questions. We can
Yes.
conclude, I think.
Yes, sir.
Somebody was raising hands. Actually, you can close the screen sharing now.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to unmute at that time itself. One more question from Umayal, ma'am. Ma'am, dizziness and balance problems are also there in adult otitis media.
Yes, yes. Otitis media is one of the major cause in adults, which can lead to balance and dizziness problems.
Okay. Fine, sir. You can
Divya, is Divya there?
No,
is
sir.
Divya Ishwaran there?
Divya Ishwaran.
Okay, good. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Is my voice clear? Because I'm having poor signal here. Yes, okay. I thank all the participants for patiently sitting for this longer hour. And I thank Dr. Janani for having a very extensive talk towards vestibular dysfunction in the pediatric population.
Thank you, sir.
And I thank Dr. Arunachalam for giving this session is cancelled today. And I thank Professor Duna and Dr. Rupesh for supporting today's event. I thank all the participants. Good night. Bye-bye. See you again.
Good night, sir. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Good night.